Did Julius Caesar single-handedly destroy the Roman Republic? Or was he simply a product of his time? A man who seized an opportunity created by a system already crumbling from the inside. To understand the man who would become a legend, we must first look at the Rome he was born into. This was a republic in name, but in reality, it was a playground for the rich and powerful. The Senate, once a body of Rome's greatest minds, was now rife with corruption. A few elite families, the patricians, controlled everything, hoarding wealth and land, while the common people, the plebeians, struggled to survive. This growing gap created massive social tension, a powder keg waiting for a spark. As the Republic's traditional values eroded, a new power emerged. Military generals, men like Marius and Sulla, showed that a loyal army was more powerful than any law passed by the Senate. They marched on Rome itself, proving that might, not right, was the new currency of power. Public trust in the system evaporated. The Republic wasn't a beacon of liberty anymore. It was a failing state, paralyzed by greed and internal conflict. It was into this chaotic world that Gaius Julius Caesar was born. He didn't create the cracks in the foundation of Rome. He was just the one who dared to knock down the walls. Caesar hailed from the Iuli, an ancient and noble patrician family that claimed descent from the goddess Venus herself. But by the time of his birth, his family's wealth and political influence had dwindled significantly. They were nobles, yes, but not among the top tier of power brokers. From a very young age, Caesar was thrust into the heart of Rome's brutal political arena. He saw firsthand how power was won, maintained, and lost. He witnessed the proscriptions of Sulla, where political enemies were publicly listed and legally murdered, their property confiscated. These early experiences didn't scare him, they taught him. They hardened his resolve, and what a resolve it was. Caesar was blessed with a brilliant mind, a sharp wit, and an almost supernatural ability to charm and persuade. His oratory skills were said to rival Ivan Cicero's, the greatest speaker of the age. He could command a room, win over a crowd, and inspire loyalty with just his words. But behind the charisma was a cold, calculating ambition. He saw the Republic's decay not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. His goal became crystal clear: to seize absolute control, to enact the reforms he believed Rome desperately needed, and to build a legacy that would echo through eternity. He wasn't just playing the game of politics. He was planning to rewrite the rules entirely. But Caesar knew he couldn't achieve his monumental ambitions alone. Rome's political landscape was a web of alliances and rivalries. To climb the ladder, you needed powerful friends. In 60 BC, Caesar did something audacious. He brokered a secret pact with the two most powerful men in Rome. Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, known as Pompey the Great, Rome's most celebrated general, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, its wealthiest man. This informal alliance became known to history as the First Triumvirate. It wasn't a legal or official arrangement, but a private agreement between three titans to pool their resources, influence, and ambitions to dominate the state. Together, they were an unstoppable force. Pompey had the military prestige and legions of loyal veterans. Crassus had the money to fund campaigns and buy political favor, and Caesar had the political cunning and popular support to navigate the complex corridors of power. They effectively sidelined the Senate, using their combined might to push through their own agendas. They manipulated elections, passed laws that benefited them, and divided the Republic's vast territories among themselves. As his reward for holding the alliance together, Caesar secured the one thing he wanted most: a 5-year term as governor of Gaul. This wasn't just a provincial post. It was a chance to build his own army, win his own glory, and accumulate the wealth he needed to challenge anyone who stood in his way. With the governorship of Gaul secured, Caesar the politician began his transformation into Caesar the military legend. For the next 8 years, from 58 to 50 BC, he waged a series of relentless and often brutal campaigns against the various Gallic tribes. This wasn't a defensive war, it was a war of conquest, pure and simple. He pushed the boundaries of the Roman world further than ever before, all the way to the English Channel and across the Rhine River into Germania. He fought hundreds of battles, besieged countless forts, and according to his own account, which may be exaggerated, killed 1 million Gauls and enslaved another million. Through these campaigns, he honed his skills as a military genius. He was known for his speed, his ability to make bold, unexpected moves, and for sharing the hardships of his men. He slept on the ground, ate the same rations, and fought alongside them in the heat of battle. This created an unbreakable bond, a fanatical loyalty. His legions weren't fighting for the Senate or the people of Rome. They were fighting for Caesar. He was their leader, their provider, and their icon. By the time the Gallic Wars were over, Caesar was no longer just another ambitious politician. He was the most famous, most powerful, and most feared man in the Roman world, with a hardened, veteran army at his beck and call. The stage was set for the final, inevitable confrontation. Back in Rome, the political landscape had shifted dramatically. Crassus, the financier of the triumvirate, had been killed in a disastrous campaign in the east. His death severed the link between Caesar and Pompey, who had grown increasingly wary and jealous of Caesar's incredible success in Gaul. Allying with the conservative faction of the Senate, who saw Caesar as the ultimate threat to the Republic, Pompey moved to strip him of his power. The Senate issued an ultimatum. Caesar must disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen to stand trial for his actions as governor. For Caesar, this was a death sentence. He knew that without the legal immunity of his office and the protection of his legions, his enemies would destroy him. He was at a crossroads. He had marched his army to the edge of his province, to a small river called the Rubicon, which marked the legal boundary of Italy. To cross it with his army would be an act of insurrection, a declaration of civil war against his own country. On the night of January 10th, 49 BC, after a period of intense deliberation, he made his decision. He reportedly uttered the famous words, "Alea iacta esta." The die is cast. He led his 13th Legion across the river. There was no turning back. This single act was the point of no return. In that moment, Caesar ceased to be a general of the Republic. He became its enemy, an invader on a collision course with Pompey and the Senate. The civil war that would ultimately tear the Roman Republic apart had begun. Imagine a single man, not just ruling Rome, but becoming Rome itself. This was the reality of Gaius Julius Caesar. After his victories, the Senate, left with little choice, named him dictator. Not for the traditional 6 months, but for 10 years. And then, ultimately, for life. This was power without precedent. Caesar began a breathtaking centralization of authority. Every leva of the state, from the legions to the treasury, now answered to him. He was no longer a servant of the Republic. He was its master. But to call him just a power-hungry tyrant would be too simple. With this absolute control, he launched a series of sweeping reforms. He overhauled the legal system, making justice more accessible. He tackled debt, a crippling problem for the common citizen. And perhaps most famously, he reformed the calendar. The Julian calendar, with its 365 days and a leap year, was so effective it remained the standard in the Western world for over 1,600 years. This wasn't just about control. It was about creating a more functional, stable Rome. Alongside these practical changes, something else was growing. A cult of personality. Statues of Caesar were erected alongside those of the gods. His image appeared on coins, a privilege previously reserved for deities or long-dead heroes. Temples were dedicated in his honor. He was portrayed as a descendant of the goddess Venus, a man touched by the divine. For many Romans, he was more than a leader. He was a savior, the one who had ended the chaos of civil war. Caesar wasn't just changing laws. He was changing the very idea of leadership. He was transforming the role from a temporary steward of the state to the living embodiment of the state. But as Caesar's power grew to godlike proportions, so did the fear in the hearts of the old guard. In the hallowed halls of the Roman Senate, whispers turned to conspiracies. Senators, men who traced their lineage back to the founding of the Republic, saw their influence vanish. They looked at Caesar, this dictator for life, and they didn't see a savior. They saw a king, a tyrant. The very thing their ancestors had overthrown centuries ago to create the Republic. They felt that he was destroying the soul of Rome, the cherished tradition of shared governance. The fear was palpable. Caesar was planning a new military campaign against the Parthian Empire. Many worried he would return even more powerful, perhaps even officially declaring himself a king. For a group of about 60 senators, led by figures like Marcus Junius, Brutus, and Gaius Cassius Longinus, waiting was no longer an option. They convinced themselves that the only way to save the Republic was to cut off its head. They formed a secret plot, bound by oaths, to restore liberty through an act of extreme violence. The day they chose was the Ides of March 5th, 44 BC, a day now infamous in history. As Caesar entered the theater of Pompey, where the Senate was meeting, the conspirators surrounded him. At first, it seemed like they were just presenting him with petitions. Then, the daggers came out. It was a brutal, frenzied attack. Caesar, the undefeated general, was trapped and defenseless. Legend says that when he saw Brutus, a man he had mentored and treated like a son, among his attackers, he uttered his final, heartbroken words. Et tu, Brutus. You too, Brutus. With that, he fell at the foot of a statue of his former rival, Pompey, his lifeblood staining the Senate floor. The conspirators held up their bloody daggers, proclaiming that tyranny was dead and liberty was restored. But they were tragically mistaken. They hadn't saved the Republic. They had just signed its death warrant. The assassination of Caesar didn't restore democracy. It plunged Rome into chaos. The assassins had a plan to kill the man, but no plan for what came next. They believed the people would hail them as liberators, but instead, the Roman populace was horrified and enraged. They loved Caesar. His funeral turned into a riot, as his loyal general, Mark Antony, delivered a fiery eulogy, revealing Caesar's will. Caesar had left a considerable fortune to every single citizen of Rome. The people's grief turned to fury against the conspirators, who were forced to flee the city. Instead of liberty, a massive power vacuum opened up. And into this vacuum stepped key figures: Mark Antony, Caesar's experienced right-hand man, and a new, unexpected player, Caesar's grandnephew and adopted son, a teenager named Octavian. Caesar's will had made Octavian his heir, giving him the powerful name Caesar and immense wealth. The Republic was torn apart by another round of brutal civil wars, this time between Caesar's Avengers and his assassins, and then between the Avengers themselves. Antony and Octavian, after initially cooperating to hunt down Brutus and Cassius, eventually turned on each other for the ultimate prize: sole control of the Roman world. The final showdown came at the naval battle of Actium in 31 BC. Octavian's forces, commanded by the brilliant Admiral Agrippa, crushed the combined fleets of Antony and his ally, the Egyptian queen Cleopatra. The lovers fled to Egypt and took their own lives, leaving Octavian as the undisputed master of Rome. The wars were over. The chaos had ended, but so had the Roman Republic. In 27 BC, Octavian, carefully avoiding the title of king or dictator, accepted the title Augustus from the Senate. He presented himself as the first citizen, a restorer of the Republic. But it was a carefully crafted illusion. In reality, he held all the power. The Roman Empire had been born from the ashes of Caesar's Republic. The assassination meant to prevent one-man rule had, ironically, guaranteed it. Julius Caesar's shadow extends far beyond the Roman Empire. His life and career became the ultimate blueprint for ambitious leaders for the next 2 millennia. He created a model for how to seize, centralize, and maintain absolute power. Future autocrats, from emperors to kings to modern dictators, would study his methods. Look at Napoleon Bonaparte. He consciously modeled himself on Caesar, adopting Roman symbols, legal reforms, and even crossing his own Rubicon by seizing power in a coup. Napoleon saw in Caesar the perfect blend of military genius and political math. This influence isn't just ancient history. Throughout the 20th century, military rulers and dictators have drawn from the Caesarian playbook. The idea of a charismatic strongman rising above the messy politics of a republic, claiming to act for the people while accumulating personal power, is a story that has been replayed time and time again. Caesar showed how to use popular reforms and military glory to build a base of support that bypasses traditional political structures. He normalized the idea that one man could embody the will of the nation. The political structures of the entire Western world were fundamentally transformed. The concept of centralized, absolute rule, once seen as a temporary emergency measure in Rome, became a permanent and often desired form of government. The ghost of Caesar haunts the halls of power to this day, a constant reminder of how republics can fall and empires can rise on the ambition of a single individual. So, how should history remember Julius Caesar? This is the great paradox of his legacy. Was he a visionary reformer who saved Rome from the endless, corrupt cycle of civil wars? There's a strong case for it. He gave land to his veterans, provided grain for the poor, and streamlined a bloated and inefficient government. He brought a level of stability that many ordinary Romans hadn't seen in their lifetimes. Or was he a ruthless tyrant? A man whose boundless ambition led him to dismantle a 500-year-old republic for his own personal glory. This is also true. He defied the Senate, slaughtered his political opponents, and ultimately made himself an absolute ruler, paving the way for centuries of imperial rule. He is a symbol of ambition's ultimate cost. His drive took him to the pinnacle of power, but it also led directly to his own violent death and the destruction of the very system that produced him. Was he the savior of stability or the assassin of democracy? The answer, frustratingly, is that he was both. He remains one of history's most complex and consequential figures. Julius Caesar did not merely rule Rome. He fundamentally and forever changed the meaning of power itself, leaving a legacy that the world is still grappling with today. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into history interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more.